What's up, YouTube? Welcome to the Counting Wisdom podcast. I wanted to talk about how John chapter 9 says that night is coming when no one can work. And Jesus mentioned that. I think, sometimes it is sort of apparent that there are some places we can sort of go to and reach people with the gospel. But it seems like there are some other places where you may not necessarily be able to reach people with the gospel. And I think that, this really shows that there's also, I think, a mindset that can happen to people where they are not able to receive, anything from God. Now, I think Jesus mentioned that in regards to the Pharisees, where, they could not, Jesus put it this way, they did not have any room for Jesus in their heart. And so, obviously, we all know that there are people who reject Jesus Christ, but I don't think they all necessarily say it for the same exact reason, other than of course maybe there is a common reason, but I think some people have their own belief of why they may reject Jesus Christ. You see that I know I've come across people, at least online, that they call the Bible a fairy tale. And to me, when they're saying that, is that, hey, maybe one of the interpretations is that, hey, Earth, this place is so evil that, the goodness of the Bible is just a fairy tale. And that is kind of one interpretation that they could have. But regardless, that's just one example of different people who sort of have their reason for rejecting the Bible and God and Jesus. And, of course, goodness. And so, in John chapter 9, Jesus says that there is coming a time when no one can work. What I think this means, it could actually be a literal thing too. I mean, when you think about what they're doing with robots, we don't really think about it all the time, but these robots, I've seen some videos of it, and I of course have never seen a robot actually in person, and they seem to kind of have a sort of hidden, you would think that, even the basic technology what they're creating now, you would think they would sort of have a place where you can go see these things, even if they're not, I guess, developed yet, but, they don't. And so, when you look at, robots, they can take a lot of people's jobs. Especially when they are so developed that they can literally do, anything that a human being can do. Especially when you get into, turning a screwdriver, you get into, using a hammer. And so I think that could actually be a literal interpretation of what Jesus is meaning about no one can work, is that, and I think, when you see the mark of the beast happening, it seems to sort of be a system where I think there is a term for this in history, but I don't remember the exact term, where the government basically takes over food and, supplies, pretty much what they want the citizens to have. And so, there could be a coming point where you don't necessarily have to work for you know a living, and especially if the CEOs, the people who are kind of have these companies. Well, let's say they replace all of their workers with these really advanced robots. They make that investment where a lot of the lower type of people are going to be out of a job. And so that could be one interpretation of no one can work, and that the mark of the beast is implemented where now the whole government is in charge of buying and selling, and hey, they're going to track what you do and different things like that, which I think can be sometimes scary. But obviously I believe that God can help us make the right decision in those decisions, and not take the mark of the beast. And I truly believe that there is a rapture, though, before the time of the Great Tribulation. But I just wanted to mention that literal interpretation of no one can work. But how I actually read the verse, though, is Jesus is really saying no one can really do good. No one can really evangelize. No one can really share the gospel. And Jesus doesn't necessarily give a time frame into, hey, when is this time going to happen? But, he does state that at some point in the future, a time is coming when no one can work. And so, I believe this means that, the gospel has possibly been preached in all the world, and people have sort of made up their mind in such a way where at least God can see that they're not going to actually change or turn. I think some people it seems like they do need some time. They do need some time to see the error of their ways and change. But I think the way the world works according to God is that there comes some time where person is sort of like past that point of ever really making a decision for Jesus. And I kind of had some thoughts about that too, but I don't know if it's really important to really talk about. But anyway, I think we have to be aware that maybe there are certain times where if you realize that your ministry has been in Las Vegas for 20 years, or I'm just using Las Vegas as an example, and maybe you've been a street preacher for a number of years. Well, I think one thing we can sort of at least keep an eye out for is a time where you are sort of preaching to a wall in a way where, hey, no one is really interested and no one is really changing. And so instead of, I don't know, like putting yourself out there unnecessarily, obviously I think God is always going to be preaching his message until the last day, I think, in some cases. But at the same time, I don't know. I mean, for example, let's say you are, someone who is in opposition to Russia, and, you may have a lot of followers. Maybe you don't necessarily have a lot of followers, but you go over to Russia and you're like, hey, I'm going to stand on the street and I'm going to protest. Or you're doing something in opposition to Russia and you find yourself going to Russia. Well, most likely, especially after this has happened a few times, most likely Russia is going to see you and take you captive. Now, obviously, I believe there are people who sort of have a mindset of, hey, I'm going anyway, irregardless of, getting caught by Russia and different things like that. But I think this message is really, just as a reminder, and for those who, do not necessarily feel obligated to do certain things like that. Obviously, I think if people really feel called by God to do something, then, there's different ways of looking at it. But just for example, you wouldn't go over to Russia, and so that would be sort of something that I think we sort of can call common sense, but yet it's not so common sometimes, because you see some crazy stories over the news. Another way of putting it would be, let's say you, I don't know, are feeling like you're called to share the gospel in all areas, and let's say you go into, I don't know, maybe a strip club. There are some places where you are not necessarily going to make a difference, I guess, in at least a way of maybe converting person to Jesus Christ. Obviously, there are things that I don't necessarily think of, and I think that, there could be an impact in some form, but I think there are definitely states of mind that people can be in, and certain types of behavior that indicate that someone is not necessarily interested in choosing Jesus, but also, actually, I think there are some cases where people show that they have thought about Jesus and the decision, maybe not in a hugely impactful way, but they know, and they reject it. When you hear people using Jesus's name as a cuss word, that one can be said ignorantly, but at the same time, some people do say it in such a way as, hey, I know about God, I know about the Bible, but I am using his name as a cuss word to indicate that I do not want anything to do with the Bible and God. And so I think these are just some of the things that I think Jesus can mean when he's talking about night is coming and no one can work. The book of Revelation seems to indicate this in the way when it says that the people did not repent, of their murders, of their sexual immorality, and it lists all these sins, and it's saying that they did not repent. And I think I've heard a few ministers, have some sort of a reaction to that, in that, there are some things that when you see it, it makes you really have a revelation, a revealing of, certain things about life and God and different things like that. Now, I do believe that, you can sort of view things as a coincidence. I do sort of believe that there are things that are sort of random in a way, meaning that, it may not necessarily be meant to give you a revelation of something. I always think of maybe the example of a flat tire. Having a flat tire may not necessarily reveal to someone that, there must be a God, and God is Jesus Christ, and I should read the Bible. But definitely, the way the events are described in Revelation, some of those things, are not even the normal part of how the earth works. Especially when even if you have some belief in science, they sort of have this estimation that, I don't know, it's like, I don't know what it is, but it's like billions of years down the road, the sun, I've heard one of the kind of calculations that, the sun will keep growing and expanding until it basically wipes out all life on the earth. And so, but they said, hey, that won't happen for, I think it was like 90 billion years or something like that. And it was some huge, crazy estimation. But still, it shows that there are, kind of some things that are not necessarily meant to even happen for a long time in their opinion. When you look at global warming, they are sort of saying, shining a light on, hey, something's going on in the world, but they're not necessarily saying global warming is a problem in that it will wipe out all life on the earth, at least in the next 50 to 100 years or so. But they are sort of saying, hey, something's going on, we need to make some changes, we need to go to electric power, and make better changes with maybe plastics, or how we dispose of trash and different things like that. And so when you see some of the things that happen in Revelation that God describes, I think anyone who sees some of that stuff, you would know, like, okay, this is something that I should repent of my ways, because it is a direct act of God. I mean, I even saw in some sort of in lawyers in a sort of a legal use of language, they classify some things as an act of God. And even in that language, it sort of reveals that there are some things that are so crazy that you really just attribute to, it being from God. And so, clearly, there are some things that even, it's not even on the same level as, things that happen in the tribulation. It's not even the same level as that. And, people know that maybe if, I don't know, I saw a video of like, you're driving down the road and a tire falls off this car, and it hits your car, and the car flips like a lot of feet in the air and flips a whole bunch of times. Well, that would be something that is sort of classified as an act of God. Like, it's not necessarily someone who did it on purpose, but it's sort of just this random kind of event that is so crazy from just normal events that can be crazy, but not necessarily to a crazy level. And so certain things are classified as, man, this is an act of God. This is crazy. And so anyway, let's read John chapter 9, verse 3. Jesus answered, "Neither this man nor his parents sinned, but that the works of God should be revealed in him. I must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. The night is coming when no one can work." And so Jesus is clearly saying that, especially in regards to miracles, and especially, during his time period, he could also be specifically talking about, when he goes to the cross, that, his works will be ceased and it will transfer to the disciples, and so he's literally also talking about, hey, there's coming a time where, I'm going to the cross and, I won't be able to do these works. And so, hey, I better heal this blind man right now, because, there's coming a time where, he won't be able to be healed, at least by Jesus. And of course, he's also talking about even the disciples, are going to be, taken out of the world, or just, die from natural causes or whatever. And so, yeah. So anyway, I think this is just insightful. Not that we should, I don't know if there's really any indication of, the night coming, other than some of the examples that I've sort of given, in that, you see maybe more of an obvious opposition, or more of an incredibly sort of, I guess I want to kind of use the word dangerous situation, where you don't necessarily, it's not an atmosphere to sort of evangelize or do something good. And so I think this can be a case by case basis, but I think definitely, when you think about maybe someone who is near Russia, or someone who is in Russia, it may not be the wisest thing to rise up against Russia, unless you are really just wanting to sort of, be that example of, someone who is in opposition to Russia. Now, I do believe God does call us to sort of different locations where, it may be sort of dangerous, or it just may be some sort of pushback from the enemy, and so I do think that there are, different places or different people, that it may be sort of, a bad environment, but I think there's still room for the gospel to be preached. I mean, think about maybe prison ministry. Prison ministry, you sort of are in, a controlled environment in a way, but, it's still kind of people who, you mostly assume that don't care about the Bible, don't care about God. And yet, people do. It's sort of an atmosphere where you can still preach the gospel to people, and some are willing to listen. And so, at the same time, when you think about maybe a strip club, going into a strip club, and preaching the gospel, that's probably not the best environment, and you're probably going to be led into some sort of temptation, obviously. But maybe something like an abortion clinic, that's a little bit different, where, it's still kind of, you're going to have that opposition, even in America, if you, and I've heard a few stories in England of, you can be praying outside of a abortion clinic or something, and you're going to, get some opposition. You may even get arrested or something like that. But I don't think those situations are what Jesus is talking about. But I think he's really talking about a time where I think it's really the tribulation, but I can't really put my finger on, exactly the time period that Jesus is talking about. But I know one example could be the tribulation. I know some people are saying that the gospel is going to be preached during the tribulation, but there are some places that exist that, a person is not going to be saved from it, and I think there are definitely mindsets that some people have that, they're not going to be saved, and it's not necessarily in the fault of God or in the fault of us who we are evangelizing to them, or, in the fault of, something else, but it's that person's own made up mindset that, hey, I'm not going to, need anything from God or the Bible. And so, anyway, hopefully this was helpful. Hopefully you got something from it. I think that, we should definitely share, today in the day and age that we live in, And then I think it's also interesting about the whole robot thing. That's kind of interesting thing. I'm into robots for sure. I think they're, it would be kind of cool to have a robot. But when you think about maybe this robot who, is kind of like working against you in a way, because, whoever controls the robot, is, having it be against you, then hey, robots aren't that cool sometimes. And so anyway, hopefully you found this one pretty interesting. And so thanks so much, and I will talk to you on the next one. See ya.